Alright, finishing up, I guess, on the word videos. I think they're pretty good videos. But, views are kind of down, and participation seems kind of down, and conversation seems kind of thin, and it's just kind of irritating. But, so what? It's the game we got to play, so we'll play it as it is. So anyway, 2 words left. Psychology, yay. That's a good one, right? Yeah, really. The next word's related, actually, the last word. Well, it's kind of the best word. Anyway, but psychology. Converse to what you might call your intelligence. So we have these 2 mechanisms. The mechanism that creates the necessity of things, the urgency, it creates the feelings, would be the psychology. And the intellect does the abstracting, the modeling in the abstract plane. Models away from our gushy parts. But obviously through the modeling of the intellect, our psychology observing what we're thinking, and it can react to the thoughts we have, especially if those thoughts are, images of what we have identified with, being run over by steamrollers and such. Then we're going to psychologically react to the image of the thing we care about being harmed. Sorry, my throat's like fucked up. Just talking and such. Still got trouble with my ears, they're not quite right yet, so it's all related, I guess. Anyway, so where was I? Yeah, psychology. So psychology is related to the higher abstract plane of our intellect, but it's also related to the cruder plane of our physiology. So the fact that I do have a sore throat, and I'm tired, or I'm some other physiological mechanism is in play, is defining part of my psychology. I don't know if we would directly call it psychology, that kind of conditioning of the mechanical parts. It's kind of hard to say a coordination, physical, would be a psychological attribute. But in a way, it's much more tightly woven into our psychology, our physical body, then certainly it is connected to our abstract. So the psychology, if it exists as a suitable word to describe an element of our brain component, certainly is tied more intimately to our physiological hormones, our mood swings. All of these things kind of substantially interact with what we might call our psychological programming. And so I guess that's the key word here, is this programming. Because your psychology is essentially a manifestation of habits, addictions, attachments, conditioning, a conditioning of the mechanism, a filtering of reactions. And it's kind of a bag of reactions, of immediacy. So something like intuition, we might call that a psychological tendency or reaction. It's this more immediate, shortcut, shorthand, kind of a coded, a simplistic psychiatric reaction. So you see some kind of dark shadow move in front of you. You say, oh, there. And then you say, oh, wait, no, it's just a dog. That kind of thing. Your psychology, like your physiology, is very reactive. And so it's this very quick, kind of necessary to survival, kind of emotional, reactive, immediate kind of brain function, where you could say the more abstract, intellectual, reasoning, more detailed database kind of idea of the intellect is further away knowledge that it has to go to the hard drive, so to speak, and analyze the documents to find the reaction that's suitable, where the visceral reaction, the psychiatric reaction, is quite reflexive. And of course, the key component of it is it generates sensation. So I guess, I mean, it shouldn't have waited this long to get to that, but that's sort of like the defining aspect of psychology, is the very fact that it generates as its reaction, not necessarily a behavior, not necessarily an action. More often what it creates is a internal reaction of a sensation, a fear or a queasiness or an unsettledness. It interacts with the physiological, the physical system, and creates changes in hormones, these kind of reactions, in a sense preparing us for what it's anticipating, whether that anticipation is correct or still there, huh? Yeah, that was fun. Yeah, I'm not just quite right. Tripping over a rock or whatever I tripped over, but I did spin and get a bit wobbly. Some more indication that something's not quite right in the bobblehead. But anyway, it's been wrong for a while, so now it doesn't really matter. Yeah. What is that? Physiological reactions. So, I mean, I just had some physiological reaction. The brain got a little, the breath is a little quicker, different little things happened. But that's the nature of your psychology. Some people are very reactive, very emotional. The intensity is right on the surface. Some people, it takes a little bit of work, a few hammer blows, before they start to react. We call this a personality, and it just kind of has to do with the practice, what the person has learned through practice, how they've learned their body has learned to play the game of life. And it doesn't learn it in any kind of intelligent way. It just learns it in this kind of erroneous, but not entirely erroneous, but kind of erroneous. I've used examples where you could end up having a hatred for the color yellow because some teacher you hated wore a yellow hat. Silly associations can be very strong associations in terms of what they become inside of your psychology, how your brain reacts. As a neurotic, I have a few of these conditions of wrong or nonsensical reactivity. I've even acquired now, it's getting somewhat better, but a bit of vertigo, where if I get to a certain height, my whole perceptual senses just break down, and I'm pretty much going to have a faint. And there's no way to figure out why. You can't see what your psychology is doing, but it's clearly reacting for some reason, and there's no way it doesn't have a pathway to some sort of mental imagery. It doesn't have any obvious association with some sort of previous pattern because you've never had it before, kind of thing. And it's just apparently it's a buildup of associations, and the last straw was put on the camel's back and it broke, and now this is the association you've acquired because you've acquired some trigger went off and created a strong association where there was only a weak one before, or something like that. But there's no point in getting into the details of how your psychology is mapped on you, but it is by these conditioned responses of experience, much like how your food tastes are acquired, your sexual preferences, all that stuff is a byproduct of your experience, and having the right things happen on the right days and avoiding having the unfortunate circumstance of very negative associations tied to very positive things, or some other thing that would create in you excessive fear or apprehension, or the opposite of excessive desire or attraction, or even addictions, necessities and needs of disproportional intensity, hypersensitivity to certain attitudes that somebody might project at you, all kinds of that crap that we call personality is pretty much a manifestation of this mechanism of psychiatric psychology being conditioned by environmental associations taking place in aspects of the neural function that aren't part of your cognitive function. So these relationships exist in your brain, but your brain won't display them to you at any point because the relationship, the connection, isn't a conscious connection. It wasn't consciously recognized, and therefore your brain can't display it for you as a memory, and you can't find the associated data that might make it understandable regarding why you would have certain habits, certain reactions, certain tendencies. It takes a lot of work to dissect those attributes you have and find where they might have been acquired, and how you got that way. But anyway, I think that's probably enough on the subject of psychology. Yeah, it's a big one because that's the one driving us. That's the one fueling the fire, pushing the organism, creating the understanding of value, creating the capacity to manifest value, and clearly it has the first shot, the most intimate power over how you understand value is going to be through your psychology. I think once you acquire enough understanding or intelligence, you will still be an emotional animal, but your intellect will have more credibility in your own, in the mechanism of your function, because you'll constantly have a program running that's checking your personal agenda, checking your personal psychology, and how much of what you're doing is perverted, even thinking, by self-interest, what you're comfortable with, which you want to be true, all that kind of corruption of psychiatric or psychological affiliation. That influences can be very corrosive and corrupting to being able to, factually and actually describe truths. Anyway, I think that's enough. Still next and such. Door open. This door probably isn't open either. Alright, $40,000 million trillion word is need. Alright, now value is a bigger word, more relevant to the overall, more relevant to all relevant subjects. Value is what gives everything relevance. But need is the engine of human value. Need is this expression of your psychology. Okay, that's what it is. It's an expression of your psychology that mandates something for performance. So we can understand engines need gasoline to run, and they need oil to keep them cool, and that's pretty much what oil does. It's the whole real point is yes, the lubrication, but it's a lot of it has to do with heat transfer. So the oil is sticky and slides across the surface and does collect heat thermically very well, and but it doesn't rust the engine parts. But anyway, that's a whole different subject, and burn away and all that kind of stuff, evaporate. So anyway, but oil, no, need. Yeah. So you can have some kind of thing and say, well, what's its performance requirements, and then you can make a list of what's needed for it to perform. And so for human beings, we say it needs to live, it needs to survive. So we establish a bunch of things that are needed for that need to be satisfied, for that performance function to be accomplished. And then we figure out it needs to be comfortable, or the function is comfort, and that comfort has another list of needs. And for many people who are reasonable, they can figure out that it's best to keep these lists as efficient and tight as possible. That what's going to be put in the need category shouldn't be extravagance. We shouldn't need Lamborghinis to be happy, or need, French this and fancy that and imported that and Gucci and we shouldn't need a bunch of, more than is practical and to get us where we need to be to function. Functionality shouldn't require extravagance, I guess is the point. So you would separate need from what might be called want by making this distinction between what's required, what has to be provided, and stuff that's optional. You can gain substantial performance without this added extra. Okay, so it's like instead of having a digital speedometer on your car, you have a regular speedometer. Instead of electric windows, you have regular windows, or that kind of thing. And that would be the difference between something basic to the function and something nice but not necessary. So necessary is kind of a related word to need. Probably can't be taken away from it. That basically necessary emphasizes the distinction between what is required and what is optional. But anyway, so the manifestation of this need in us comes through the creation of these feelings of necessity, sense of requirement. Not so much a knowledge of it, not so much a logical deduction that is required, but more an expression of psychology that says somehow it would be wrong if it was changed or altered or not the way you want it to be. If all these leaves turned pink, I might find it irritating and obnoxious and annoying, and it might make life difficult if I had to, look at all that pink all the time. But I might acclimate to it also eventually. But there would be a need in a sense of it will be a sacrifice and an unpleasantness to be endured to have to transition. And so there's a price to pay for it. If this was the requirement of function. And then, I just keep trying to avoid getting into a value conversation on need. But it is the exchange of satisfactions that really does make the word important. The need wouldn't mean anything if satisfaction was free. If what was needed could be supplied inexhaustibly and for free. So need becomes relevant just because of this idea that the dependency or the requirement usually has to come with, somebody has to supply your fuel and your oil. Your maintenance is not free. How far to take this? So I guess I'll get to get to the finish. So the thing that's stated to be the fundamental needs of the human is this idea of survival. This need to leave prodigy into the world. Many people claim they need to do that. They need to know somebody's doing it. They need the comforting thought that it will go on after they're gone. It will go on after they're gone. It rhymes. Might be quotable. Anyway, these are things they would pay a high price to acquire. They seem to think these are necessary things. Somehow living to be old and decrepit is important, necessary. Instead of, the counter might be, you have some maximum performance and, just call it a day when things aren't maximally performing anymore. Have a standard of function rather than the standard being some absolute, get as many drops as possible out of it, when the last drops might not be very good. They just might be swill on the bottom, or a bunch of leavings, a bunch of stuff that precipitated out. Just pollution, and who wants to drink the pollution? But anyway, just a metaphor. I don't know how to exactly. This just seems obvious to say that most of the stuff that people say they need isn't necessary to anything but what they claim is to satisfy another stated need. And all the needs, none of them have been justified in terms of explained to be necessary. So I could say my life is necessary, but I would have a hard time justifying the statement by evidence. I could just say, I think it's necessary, but somebody could make a counter argument about how it likely is to produce nothing, and there will be no there is no necessity to anything particularly brilliant. There's only a necessity to my satisfaction of a desire. And so people seem to think that satisfaction of their individual desires is some sort of sacred priority. That if you offend an individual's desire, that you somehow, this is like somehow the ultimate trespass. And in the end, the fact is what's going to tell the tale is what is produced in net in the end. The truth is that sometimes you're better off getting hit by a train. Because nothing good was going to happen to you. Sometimes somebody else interfering and fucking everything up was the best thing that could happen to you. Sometimes it's like a war, or somebody even pointed out, these assholes who always have to change subjects. But on the Jefferson rape video, we were trying to make the argument that somehow the Louisiana Purchase wasn't a brilliant coup for the United States. And but the argument would be, of course, it causes you have to break some eggs to have great things. But I think it would be silly to say the world would be better off without that happening. I think it would have been a horrible mess to have 3 or 4 nations in North America, instead of the United States, nations that would have exploited each other for fuel and different things, would have industrialized very differently, and I don't think they would have come to the rescue in Europe for World War II. And so it seems pretty certain that if the Louisiana Purchase never happened, you probably would have Nazi Europe now. Lots of implications. So yeah, you can say it was bad for some people in the short run, but some of those people were doomed anyway. As I've stated, I don't think the North American tribes were going to survive the Aztecs. I think the Aztecs were going to consume them eventually. So their lifespan was limited. Rome, the South American Rome, was coming. And but whatever. Who wants to? The point is that sometimes bad acts have good results, or even acts that aren't necessarily bad by intent, but just bad by aggressiveness. So you can't be sure until you calculate, the net product, and it's making those calculations carefully that is should be the priority. Is taking the time to figure out possible permutations and possible scenarios, and seeing if you can find an option that satisfies the most need, for leaving the least need sacrificed to dissatisfaction or languish, or however you want to describe it. But that's really the optimization and efficiency. And but again, that requires one to have premise value declarations of what actually has value. And you can't even presume the value in the survival of your culture or your kind. You can't presume value in any of it, because the fact that it's very expensive to exist. And so there's the irony is that the commonly perceived necessities of existence are logically, without any kind of coherent representation in a logical calculation. There's no way to logically find function. And without a logical function, it's very hard to establish the necessity of maintaining the function. And that just is where the whole thing collapses. But what you can't collapse, in my opinion, is the fundamental logic, where you might state that things in a lesser condition need to be elevated to a better condition. That need is the durable need. Whether anything needs to survive or procreate into the future, those questions I don't think have answers that in there, no affirmative logical answer, only answers recognizing there seems to be nothing but downside risk and no upside potential in creating need machines. I guess that's what I should have gotten to, was the idea that we are just need machines. We create problems and by existing, and then solve some small percentage of them and call ourselves accomplished. And that is self-serving, self-fulfilling function, and that's just not good enough logically. Spiders all over my damn door. Such. Jeez. Until next time.